The sky isn't blue anymore. It's a seething swirl of copper and violet. Like the world's veins have burst open, spilling molten light in every direction. I've been on the air for 6 hours straight, but I can't tear my eyes away from the horizon. Even through the cracked window of this makeshift radio shack, I can feel the heat rising, a stifling reminder that nothing is as it was. I want you to picture the landscape. Ancient oak trees that once stood sentinel now charred. Black skeletons, their bark curled back like burn victims. Fields that used to hum with the promise of spring have been bleached white, as though someone dusted them with bone ash. Entire towns sit deserted. Roofs caved in, windmills toppled into their own foundations, and telephone poles snapped like twigs. Cracked roads stretch out like broken spines, split open by earthquakes triggered when the magnetosphere first began contorting under the sun's wrath. They tell me the flare's been building for weeks, but until last night, nobody believed. The warnings. Governments collapsed one by one. First the satellites, then the power grids, and finally whatever faint sense of order remained. Survivors now wander like ghosts, faces streaked with soot, eyes hollow, skin blistered by ultraviolet blasts. Some move in small packs, scavenging overturned cars for canned food, tin cans that may as well be ancient relics. Others have retreated underground, in abandoned subways or former mining tunnels, seeking refuge from radiation that turns living flesh to ash. I broadcast from the basement of what used to be Midland City's public library. 5 years ago, these stacks would have smelled of old paper and dusty leather. Now they smell of stale sweat, generator exhaust, and dusty desperation. All around me are survivors rigging together a radio transmitter from salvaged parts, a jury-rigged patchwork of copper coils, salvaged batteries, and bent steel. The central console is lit by a single flickering LED. Every time the solar flares, electromagnetic interference surges. The light stutters like a dying heartbeat. Outside, the wind carries dust, microscopic shards of silica that once made up farmland soil. It clings to your lungs, making every breath feel like you're trying to suck water through a straw. The sun pulses overhead, flaring in bursts of gold-white brilliance. If you squint too long, your vision warps, and afterward, you see ghost lights, dancing at the edges of your sight. It's as if the very atmosphere has warped into a living thing, corrupted by cosmic fury. Human structures have become grotesque monuments to a civilization that thought itself invincible. Highways twist skyward, before descending into sinkholes that opened overnight. Skyscrapers stand as hollowed-out mausoleums, their glass facades shattered, revealing floors caked in dust and punctured by debris. Bridges arch over rivers that have either dried to cracked beds or swollen into muddy torrents fueled by glacial melt. Every landmark I once knew now resembles a haunted cathedral of the dead. No governing body remains to coordinate relief. There are rumors of small enclaves, the Rust Valley Collective in the old Midwest, or the Water Watchers near what used to be the Great Lakes. But none of them broadcast on the same frequency. We're scattered, isolated. We cling to rumors like lifelines, a spring that still flows, a greenhouse resistant to UV decay, or a stash of solar-powered desalination units somewhere up north. But all I'm hearing is static and desperation. Electricity is a memory. We run on scavenged diesel or stolen batteries from abandoned hospitals. The one generator powering this station sputters on its third straight day of near-constant operation. Every dawn, I crawl out to refill its tank with fuel from a pump that's so old I can't tell if it's accurate anymore. Sometimes I find nothing. Sometimes I find a few liters, enough to keep the transmitter alive for a few hours. Space probes sent back warnings months ago. A coronal mass ejection heading straight for Earth. But no one moved in time. Early storms wiped out satellites, and by the time the first waves of charged particles reached us, it was too late. Now we're living on borrowed time, waiting for the next eruption, one that could fry every ounce of remaining circuitry. But still we broadcast, because in this haze of destruction, your voice on the air is proof you exist. I can't tell you what the temperature is outside. All the mercury gauges melted last month. but I know the heat presses in like the weight of a tombstone. Each morning I spit up grit that tastes of rust and old fear. I've seen people break under this weight, crawling into abandoned cars and refusing to speak, letting the sun claim them. I've seen others try to band together, only to devolve into savagery when panic sets in. Yet here, in this basement, amid the rubble, I cling to the microphone. My voice is scratchy, worn down by static, but it reaches out into the void. Because despite it all, I want you to know, someone is still paying attention. Someone still cares. The world may be unrecognizable, but the act of listening, it makes us human. My name is Dahlia Cortez. 2 years ago, I was an electrical engineer, designing satellite components that now hang in twisted orbits, dead husks around the planet. I had a family, a life that seemed normal. Morning coffee on the porch, long days at work, weekends spent camping. That world died in an instant, like a candle snuffed out by a single gust of wind. When the governments fell, I was at a remote solar observatory in Arizona, doing what I loved, calibrating sensors, monitoring sunspot activity. I had just downloaded the latest stream of data when the transmission cut out in a sudden burst of static. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Then I saw the readouts. A massive X-class flare, the biggest ever recorded. I don't even remember the drive home. The roads were already deserted, traffic lights dead. I passed overturned semis, abandoned, cars still idling, their drivers who'd fled on foot. By the time I reached my parents' house, they were gone. Nothing but empty beds and an urn of what was left of our family dog after scavengers had taken everything else. Something in me snapped. I couldn't go back to any sense of normal. The world had shifted on its axis, and I had no choice but to move with it. I wandered for weeks, leaning on my technical skills, repairing whatever generator I could, find jury-rigging solar panels to power LED lanterns. I teamed up with a small band of survivors. Mara, a nurse with battle-hardened eyes. Hiro, a former military medic who'd lost an arm in the initial aftershocks. And Antoine, a botanist forced underground when the UV index skyrocketed. Together, we pooled our skills. I handled electricity. Antoine tended to a tiny greenhouse. He rigged in the subway tunnels. Mara patched wounds from scavenger attacks, and Jiro kept watch. We called ourselves the Last Light Collective, because all we had was a battered kerosene lamp and a solar inverter cobbled together from satellite parts. I kept thinking if we could just broadcast our location, our little oasis underground, maybe someone else out there needed our help or could share supplies. But every time I keyed the microphone, I got nothing but static in return. The frequencies had become a graveyard of lost voices, so I started broadcasting stories instead. Updates on radiation levels, instructions on how to filter water, descriptions of where to avoid, old highways littered with Tesla coils and military drones mindlessly strafing anything that moved. I'm not a natural storyteller. I don't have the booming baritone of a radio host. My voice cracks sometimes, especially when I talk about Antoine, who finally succumbed to radiation sickness 3 weeks ago. I still can't bring myself to bury him outside. Down here, there's no soil. Instead, his ashes sit in a tin can beside the transmitter, a sad monument to the fragile line between hope and oblivion. What drives me now is this microphone. When I speak, I feel connected to a world that's largely silent. I tell myself that maybe, somewhere out there, someone hears me. Maybe another engineer, another survivor, another soul who's clutching a picture of the world before. Maybe they listen and know they're not alone. That thought keeps me awake at night, staring at the glow of the control panel, willing the signal to keep fighting through the cosmic interference. I survive by routine. At dawn, I venture out with my Geiger counter and a small solar panel tied to my backpack. I check radiation hotspots, places where the solar flare has seeded the soil with particles that glow sickly blue in the twilight. I scavenge for scrap electronics, hoping to find a chip or a diode that still works. Then I return to the bunker to feed what's left of our hydroponic patch, xylem and phloem, extracted from tomatoes and lettuce that barely survive under artificial LED light. At night, I climb to the surface, carefully, through a collapsed stairwell, to stand under the twisted frame of what used to be the library's skylight. The stars are gone, replaced by a shattered mesh of dead satellites' debris, and the smoldering outline of Venus flickering overhead. Sometimes I whisper apologies to the sky. Sorry we failed to protect you. Sorry we left this world in ruins. My personal losses run deep. My fiancé, Armand, didn't know how to survive without the comforts of modern life. He couldn't handle the radiation masks, the constant anxiety. He walked out one morning toward a rumored safe zone and never returned. A part of me still expects him to burst through the door with a grin, carrying a bag of fresh-baked bread he somehow found. But he won't. He's probably gone like so many others, swallowed by dust storms or claimed by radiation. What keeps me going is the thought of building something new. No, not new, but something resilient. If I can broadcast instructions, build a network of survivors who know how to harness solar power, how to shield their skin from UV radiation, how to cultivate microgreens in half-broken buildings, then maybe we stand a chance to rebuild. Maybe we can be more careful, more respectful of the sun that gave us life, but also brought us to our knees. But right now, none of that matters. At this very moment, the sun is preparing to unleash its fury again. The indicators have been spiking. For hours, solar wind density doubling, coronal loops flaring unpredictably. My heart hammers every time the monitor ticks up another notch. I can feel it in my bones, like the Earth itself is bracing for a blow. Listeners, if you're out there, let me tell you who I am. I'm a survivor, a technician, a witness to the end of days as we knew them. I carry scars, inside and out, and I've lost almost everything. But I still speak. I still share what little knowledge I have. Because if this is the last message I ever send, I want you to know, even when the world ignites, we fight the darkness with our voices. I've always been fascinated by the mechanics behind solar storms. The magnetic field lines snapping, charged, particles spiraling toward Earth at near light speed, colliding with our atmosphere in a blaze of radiation. In college, I wrote papers predicting how a sustained CME, coronal mass ejection, could cripple satellites. But nothing prepares you for the moment when the prediction becomes reality. At midnight 2 nights ago, the first wave hit. I was in the bunker, working on recalibrating a homemade magnetometer. The monitor flickered, the needle spiked off scale. I scrambled to check the backup power supplies. Batteries drained alarmingly fast under the sudden surge of geomagnetic currents. My heart seized as I flicked switches, desperately rerouting power from the greenhouse lights to the transmitter. I knew that if we went dark now, we might never transmit again. Radiation levels soared. My Geiger counter beeped non-stop, its rhythm like a death knell. Outside, the ground level readings shot up to 600 millisieverts per hour, enough to give a lethal dose in a matter of days. The Prime Minister's council meetings, digital, and now lost in servers fried by the initial storm, had estimated a worst case of 50 millisieverts. They were off by an order of magnitude. Communications have collapsed. The deep space network is dark, satellites spinning out of control, plunging toward Earth as their control circuits fry. GPS is gone. We can't triangulate locations, can't call for help. We don't even know if there's anywhere left that's safer. The usual bread and butter of survival, finding clean water, sourcing fuel, has become secondary to avoiding radiation poisoning. Water, once taken for granted, is now a dangerous commodity. Wells drilled deep into ancient aquifers are laced with radioactive isotopes. Even rainwater is contaminated. Clouds, supercharged by the solar flare, are dumping radioactive fallout. I've got a makeshift filtration system. Activated charcoal, makeshift resin filters scavenged from industrial plants, and a final UV lamp that cycles on when the generator holds. It's not perfect. Every liter I drink carries a trace of cesium-137. But it's enough to stay alive. Food is near impossible to cultivate outside. Seeds planted in open fields turn brittle under radiation. Antoine's hydroponic patch is all we have. a jet of nutrient solution delivered drop by drop to lettuce leaves that glow faintly phosphorescent in the dark. The roots dangle into a tank that filters water through aquarium pumps salvaged from an abandoned pet store. The yield is minimal, barely enough greens to stretch our ration of canned beans. But it's something. Every day I make calculations, radiation dose rates, battery discharge curves, and the half-life of isotopes we're dealing with. At 30,000 kilometers above us, the International Space Station is an inferno. Debris from it rains down in twisted metal shards. Any structure outside our bunker's makeshift Faraday cage is at high risk. Mara seals the windows with lead sheets, plucked from old X-ray labs, and layers them with sandbags. Jiro constructs a tunnel deeper into the earth below us, just in case. Even with all this preparation, survival is harder by the hour. Each time we venture out, we suit up in radiation gear. Sealed Tyvek jumpsuits, makeshift face shields from plexiglass panels and respirators that can only filter particulate, not gamma radiation. We keep movement to a minimum. Every minute outside, every crack in the seal, every stray photon of UV chips away at your immune system. Yet beyond the physics, the psychological toll is crushing. People whisper that the sun is punishing us. Mother, Earth retaliating for centuries of abuse. I don't believe in cosmic karma, but standing on the cracked pavement as the heat haze flickers across my vision, I can understand why someone might feel that way. The air shimmers with electric energy. You can taste the ozone, sharp metallic draining your lungs. The world has become one massive furnace, and we're the ants scrambling for shelter. Then there are the rogues, bands of scavengers who roam, the irradiated streets in armored suits patched together from riot gear and road signs. They ambush anyone stupid enough to wander out alone. They're looking for food, yes, but more than anything, they want electronics. Capacitors, diodes, anything that can help them jury-rig a dosimeter or a filter circuit. They treat technology like currency. A single working solar cell could fetch a week's worth of canned grub. A week ago, I heard there was a facility 50 miles south, a defunct semiconductor plant that might still hold usable silicon wafers. High grade, perfect for solar cells. It was a miracle. I convinced Mara and Jiro to come with me. We set out before dawn in the old ambulance we'd retrofitted with lead-lined panels on the windshield. The engine died 3 times en route, each sputter echoing like a machine's dying gasp. We carried our dosimeters in plastic bags to avoid detection. Rumor was that scavenger eyes glowed with their own built-in Geiger vision. We made it to the plant by mid-morning. The building's skeleton was collapsed, glass shards glinting like shards of broken diamonds under the hazy sun. Inside, conveyor belts hung from the ceiling like ancient vines, and the concrete floors crumbled underfoot. We picked through crates of silicon ingots, half of them cracked by the heat. We scored maybe a dozen wafers, just enough to add a row, of panels to our rig back home. Each wafer was a lifeline. Even a small solar array could keep our transmitter on long enough to catch a sliver of clear signal between geomagnetic storms. But the trip nearly cost us our lives. On the way back, the ambulance's lead shielding partially failed. My dosimeter spiked at 800 millisieverts per hour when I leaned out to push the vehicle free from rubble. My skin prickled. I felt sick, like I'd swallowed shards of glass. By the time we limped back to the bunker, my DNA had taken a blow. No one could repair. Jiro wrapped my wounds and said I should rest. I refused. There's no time to rest when the next wave is imminent. So here we are, riding the razor's edge of survival. I'm scrubbing my skin with alcohol, trying to remove any radioactive particles before they can lodge into my bloodstream. Every night, I write down a new protocol. How to build a lead-lined shelter, how to filter water to something less lethal, how to stretch protein bars for just one more day. And every night, the sun hums beneath the horizon like a wound that refuses to heal. The sun's corona has ballooned to Earth's size in telescopic images, an expanding shell of plasma ready to engulf us. Scientists predicted the CME would arrive in 3 days. Now they say it's already here, arriving in pulses. Each pulse fries another layer of protection, Satellite comm networks, power transformers, and the fragile filters in every device we rely on. Even our radios flicker in and out, like dying fireflies. I broadcast scientific updates, but most of the time I'm just repeating what I know. Radiation is shortening everyone's lifespan. Mutate your crops underground. Trust no one who doesn't. Pass a Geiger test. I'm the voice of dying wisdom, broadcasting to a world that may not hear me until it's too late. But maybe you are listening. Maybe you're building a lid-lined bunker of your own. Maybe you've got a crew of your own. A small group of misfits holding on to hope by the slimmest of threads. If you are, that's why I'm still here, speaking into this microphone. Because if we don't share what we learn, if we don't teach each other how to fight back against the sun's fury, then all of this, my efforts, your efforts, are for naught. We're running out of time. Not just days, but hours. And in the brightness of that truth, we soldier on. The day after we returned with the silicon wafers, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside the bunker door, pounding and muffled by lead-lined walls. My heart froze. We thought we were safe down here. Mara leapt from her cot, grabbing her makeshift maul, just a length of steel pipe with a concrete head. Jiro aimed his scalpel politically repurposed wrench at the door. I keyed the mic to warn whoever was out there. But the static overwhelmed my voice before I could even sputter and stay back. I cracked open the peephole, two silhouettes glinting in the morning glare. Neither wore full suits, just tattered clothes wrapped in gauze. Their respirators hung loose around their necks. I recognized one instantly, a kid from my old college, Lab Jasper Nguyen. He was notorious for pranks, never someone I thought I'd see as a scavenger. Beside him was Mara's younger brother, a kid I'd once babysat. Neither of them looked like the people I remembered. Their faces were sunburned and grim. "What do you want?" I hissed through the chink in the door. Jasper's voice trembled. "We heard your broadcast. Jiro patched me up when I broke my leg. I need water, medicine, anything." Mara hesitated, then knelt beside me. Her voice broke, but she masked it with steel. "We can't let them in unless they pass the test. You know the rules. Rules. A code we established when desperate hands first knocked on our door. Anyone seeking refuge must submit to a full Geiger scan, no exceptions. Produce food, water, or medicine equivalent to a week's ration if they're strangers. Answer 3 simple questions about their background. Confirm. Identity." I told them to stand aside. Jiro flicked on the dosimeter. Jasper tried to step inside anyway, and the dial jumped to 200 millisieverts per hour. "I know it's bad," he gasped, "but my sister's at risk. She's at the old farm west of here." I glanced at Mara. Her eyes flickered between compassion and rage. "If he's lying, we die." Jiro tapped the meter. "I can't confirm these kids are safe. If we let them in, they could be carrying more radiation." I gave them a ration bar and a filtered water flask, barely enough to keep them alive. In exchange, they offered medicine, a few antibiotic pills, a bandage, and a vial of painkillers. Not equitable, but sometimes you compromise. I let them stay in the corridor, just barely out of main bunker range. The next morning, Jiro bolted awake to alarms. A sudden spike in radiation at our shallow intake vent. Someone had torn off one of our lead sheets, probably in the night. Mara found footprints in the dust, 2 pairs of soles heading toward the greenhouse. I knew immediately. Someone tried to poison our only crop. I smashed the emergency switch, sealing the greenhouse in its own lead-lined bubble. By the time we pried it open, the lettuce lay limp, the water tank irradiated. 4 weeks of growth, gone. My stomach twisted into knots. "They're desperate," I whispered, voice cracking. "Desperation makes people do awful things." That. Same day, the next pulse of the flare hit. The generator roared as arcs of electricity sizzled through the wiring. The lights flickered off, plunging us into darkness. Mara scrambled for candles. Jiro fished out headlamps with dwindling battery packs. I radioed all channels. Again, nothing but static. We ventured out at midday, cloaked in suits patched with every bit of scrap we'd collected. The world was a furnace. My dosimeter read an average of 1.2 sieverts per hour. levels so lethal that 5 minutes outside risked acute radiation sickness. Yet we had to salvage. First stop, the old gas station. I needed diesel for the generator, maybe just enough to keep us alive for another day. The pump was iced over, but there were barrels behind the building. Mara and Jiro each hefted a barrel on either side of the hose as I pried loose the cap. The hiss of pressurized gas was like a sigh of relief. We siphoned 3 barrels, soaked, through our gloves, so hot it singed our sleeves. The barrels nearly blistered our skin through layers of protective fabric. Then we heard the distant rumble, like a freight train tearing across the desert. Sand whipped into the air, forming a spiraling vortex that swallowed everything in its path. A dust devil of pure, radiant fury. We barely made it into the ambulance before it hit. The temperature spiked 30 degrees in a matter of seconds. My suit's internal cooler failed. I felt my lungs sear, as though I'd inhaled molten glass. When I dragged myself back here, I radioed every known frequency. The dust storm, gamma radiation levels rising to 20 sieverts per hour. Seek shelter deep underground. That's an order. But these are words in the void. Maybe someone heard, maybe no one did. At night, the radio crackles with ghostly voices, snatches of other survivors trying to form a network. A woman in Minnesota warns of a flooded nuclear plant. A man in Brazil offers to trade medicinal roots. A child in India recites a poem he learned before the world died. Each voice reminds me why we press on. Connection. Even if it's fleeting, even if we never meet, these voices anchor us to what it means to be human. Yet trust erodes faster than metal under acid. The night before last, Jiro caught Jasper sneaking toward the supply lockers. He'd rationed out meds without telling anyone, blaming it on his sister's urgent need. When we confronted him, he broke down. I'm gonna see if she's still alive. I can't watch her die. She's all I have left. Mara's fists clenched. You took food that could have lasted us another week. I know, he whispered, but I'm not letting my sister die alone. I want to believe him, but out here hope can kill you. You hope for water and you walk into a radiation hotspot. You hope for shelter and you stumble into a scavenger ambush. You hope your sister is alive and you find nothing but an empty farm. Every hope must be weighed against the cost. That same night, the bunker's lead shielding cracked from the heat. I could hear the metal groaning, fighting anyway to protect us from the waves battering Earth's magnetic shield. We worked for hours welding and patching until our skin blistered through gloves. When morning came, Jiro collapsed, 4th degree burns on his arms. He trembled, fever climbing. My pulse thudded. He's the heart of our little group. Without him sewing bandages, we don't stand a chance. So I called in favors. On the air, I broadcast, Last Light Collective needs medical supplies, gauze, burn salve, any salvageable antibiotics. Coordinates 8824, West 3251 North. Willing to trade solar panels or fuel cells. Within minutes, a response came. Be there at dawn. East Gate. I'll bring gold ring salve and scraps of titanium for shielding. I'm the Hermit of Jackson County. Trust no one else. Trusting a hermit near a forest known for radiation sinkholes is a gamble. But even a dangerous gamble beats certain death. Under the pale light of a flaring sun, Mara and I set out to meet this stranger. We carried 2 packed bags, one brimming with silicon wafers and spare capacitors, the other with ration bars and handfuls of seeds. The trek to Jackson County should have been 2 hours. It took 6, picking our way around fissures belching steam and embers. My dosimeter hovered around 0.8 sieverts per hour for most of the journey. Dangerous but survivable if we kept moving. When we arrived, the hermit stood at the edge of an abandoned orchard, his face half hidden beneath a burlap hood. He held a battered metal box. Dahlia Cortez, he croaked. I nodded. Hermit? He nodded back. He handed me the metal box. Inside, burned salve jars, syringe kits, medical gold in this wasteland. A scrap of titanium for shielding. No charge, he said, voice gravelly. Just help me after. I need a solar cell to keep my gut fermenter running. I felt hope crack open inside me, dangerous hope. But I nodded. We'll trade. That night, Jiro lay on a cot scrawled with leads and electrodes. The burn salve looked miraculous. I applied it to his arms, his skin still fragile as wet paper. He opened his eyes, managed a weak grin. "You brought the world," he rasped. I choked back tears. This is why we keep broadcasting. So when someone hears and comes, even a hermit, they remind us that we're not alone. But the sun has other plans. The moment Jiro closed his eyes, the lights flickered. Once, twice, and then went dark. The generator had given its last breath. Radiation spikes chased us into our bunker like a shark scenting blood. The dosimeter in the hallway read 15 sieverts per hour, enough to kill in minutes if you were anywhere else. We huddled in the core, the hermit's crude gut fermenter humming like a lullaby. "Next pulse comes in 8 hours, I said, though I wasn't certain. The alarms on the backup monitor sometimes lie. Mara stared at the blacked-out windows. "We don't have time for guilt," she said, voice cold. "We survive or we die." I nodded. There's no magic cure. Every breath, every inch of flesh teeters on the brink. And yet, I refuse to give up. Because somewhere out there, someone is still listening. By sunrise, the bunker's darkness felt absolute, as though the world had been snuffed. But then I heard it. A low hum, a pulsing resonance that beat in time with my rattling heart. It emanated from a cluster of cables I'd wired into the generator days ago. The hermit's fermenter had produced enough biofuel to kickstart the engine. Miraculously, it roared to life, lights flickering on in a cascade of relief. I rushed to the console. The transmitter sputtered back. Static, yes. But beneath it, a faint signal. It repeated every 15 seconds a set of coordinates. I recorded them carefully. 3512 north, 7889 west. A working underground bunker fully stocked, an oasis in the irradiated wasteland. It could be a trap. Every time we've chased a rumor, it's ended in death or betrayal. But after days of near starvation and radiation burns, hope demands we follow where it leads. Mara hesitated, scanning the monitor's green glow. "What if it's too late? What if they've succumbed already?" "They're broadcasting," I replied, fingers trembling as I keyed the mic. "We hear you. Help is on the way." Moments passed like lifetimes. Then we heard it. A reply, distorted by noise but unambiguous. "Proceed at dawn. Watch for the red tower. We have supplies and shelter." I exhaled so hard I thought my lungs might collapse. Jiro, pale and feverish, stirred on his cot. "Dahlia," he whispered. "What is it?" We gathered him onto a stretcher. His burns had progressed into infection. Without antibiotics, he won't last long. But this new bunker has a medical wing, if the coordinates are true. We strapped him to the stretcher and prepared to move out. But as dawn approached, the worst of the solar flare descended. A storm of charged particles battered the Earth's magnetosphere. The alarm on the central console screamed, "Radiation at 50 sieverts per hour." All around us, the bunker's lead walls crackled with gamma blasts. Dust seeped through gaps. The lights dimmed. Mara jammed a hand onto a switch. "We have to go now." She yanked me back as the floor shuddered beneath us. A tremor, an effect of seismic disturbances triggered by geomagnetic storms, rocked the bunker. Pipes burst. Water hissed. We navigated the labyrinthine hallways. Me holding Jiro's stretcher, Mara carrying a bag of supplies, Jasper and his sister following with the hermit. Dosimeters read 70 sieverts per hour, levels so lethal that even a few seconds would cause radiation burns. We stayed close to the walls where shielding was thickest. At the airlock, I paused. The panel to open the main blast door was fried, fused shut by a recent power surge. My hands trembled as I jabbed at the override. Sparks flew. I felt a jolt, a tingling that crept beneath my skin. If I'm not careful, I'll be a casualty before we even step outside. Finally, the door groaned open. We emerged into a world gone white, blindingly so from reflected gamma light. The air smelled of iron and ash. My visor fogged, but I forced myself forward. We found the ambulance buried under rubble. With agonizing slowness, I pried off the lead panels, dragged Jiro in, and climbed atop. I fired up the engine. Miraculously, it still thundered. As we choked out through the shattered city streets, the radio crackled beneath my ear. "You're clear, opposite the red tower. We'll guide you." But the path was anything but clear. Roads had buckled. A massive sinkhole gaped where Interstate 40 used to run. We detoured through a residential block. Houses reduced to chimneys, furniture charred. A pack of irradiated dogs lumbered toward us, their eyes glowing like embers. I revved the engine and they scattered, letting out inhuman howls that echoed off ruined walls. Through the shards of broken glass, I saw a silhouette burning across the street. A man in a tattered lab coat, arms outstretched, face upturned. To the sky as lightning-like arcs of electricity danced around him. I slammed the brakes. The ambulance screeched to a halt. Even through my visor, I could see his eyes. Wide, manic, yet somehow serene. He opened his mouth to speak, but his words were swallowed by a crackle of static from my radio. Then he dissolved into a cascade of light, atoms ripped apart by the solar storm. The thunderclap of his annihilation shook me to my core. That man had been a scientist like me, someone who believed they could understand the sun. And in one moment, he was gone. Mara grabbed my shoulder. "We have to go," she hissed. I nodded, fighting bile that rose from my gut. I climbed back into the ambulance, pressed the pedal to the floor. The wheels skidded on fractured asphalt as I lurched forward. The red tower came into view. A skeletal broadcast mast, rigged with solar panels, still standing when all else had fallen. Waves of static filled the cab as voices guided us through side streets that hadn't collapsed. We reached a concrete barricade topped with lead sheets. This was the entrance to their bunker. A hatch hissed open. Voices shouted, "Hurry, inside!" We carried Jiro in, stepping into a corridor that smelled of antiseptic, like a hospital. Bright halogen lamps revealed a group of survivors in Tyvek coats, working fluently around medical equipment. They whisked Jiro onto a gurney, sketched lines for nasogastric tubes. I staggered back when I saw their dosimeter readings, 0.05 sieverts per hour, practically negligible compared to where we'd been. I collapsed into a chair as someone wrapped a warm blanket around me. The hermit, face half hidden beneath his hood, placed a battered tin mug in my hand. I drank the lukewarm broth, feeling it seep into my bones. For the first time in weeks, I felt something unfamiliar. Relief. They introduced themselves. Dr. Farah Malik, a radiation oncologist. Captain Reyes, a logistician who'd organized the facility. And Cole Kim, a former agronomist overseeing their vertical farms. Their bunker was built beneath an old telecom station, designed to withstand nuclear blasts and solar storms. Their power came from a string of solar arrays, shielded beneath quartz glass domes. Technology I'd only dreamed of. They had purified water, a functioning lab, and enough food to feed 400 survivors for 6 months. They offered to treat Jiro, to give Mara a secure job in their medical bay, to bring Jasper's sister into their school program. Then they asked me what I could offer. I swallowed. "I'm an electrical engineer," I said. "I can help maintain your power systems if you'll have me." Dr. Malik's eyes shone. "We need someone like you. We've struggled to keep our backup generators running. Our last electrical specialist died when the power surged." Tears burned behind my visor. I nodded so hard my helmet rattled. "I'll do whatever it takes." They ushered us deeper into the bunker, past rows of Geiger counters, through a decontamination chamber, and into a ward where Jiro slept, clutching a saline drip. I knelt beside him, brushing sweat from his brow. His breath was shallow but steady. I whispered, "You made it." He squeezed my hand, and I saw hope flicker in his eyes. Then the alarms blared again, a new reading, a localized solar storm, just as intense as the last. This facility would stand a chance. Their shielding was top tier. But out in the world, everything else would buckle. I heard screaming through the intercom. Outposts in Florida and Texas reporting catastrophic surges. "Entire city's going dark. The map on the wall showed red patches blooming across the globe like fresh wounds. At that moment I realized, this isn't just about Jiro or Mara or me. It's bigger. The world is fracturing beneath a cosmic assault. If we're going to survive, we need networks, like this one, to stitch humanity back together. Not just bunkers, but knowledge, expertise, communication. I rose from my knees, heart pounding with purpose. I stepped into the central chamber, a circular room lined with banks of computers, solar panels feeding into battery arrays. Captain, Reyes greeted me, pointing to a wall display. We've recorded every broadcast you've made for the last 3 months. Your technical details saved countless outposts. We can't lose you. I took a shaky breath. Then let's keep broadcasting. I'll join your team, but my transmitter stays on. I'll keep sending out instructions. How to build these domes, how to filter water, how to shield a makeshift lab. If there's another community out there, whether it's 100 miles away or halfway around the world, they need to hear what we're doing. Dr. Malik nodded. Agreed. We'll strengthen your signal, build repeaters. We'll push out content, medical protocols, agricultural guidelines, engineering blueprints, for as long as we can. In that moment, as the solar flare raged above, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in months. True hope. The world was unraveling, yes. But maybe, just maybe, we could begin to stitch it back together again, one broadcast at a time. The storm howled for 2 days straight. Every hour, rain laced with radiation pummeled the surface. The bunker's quartz domes held firm, scattering the worst of the charged particles. Inside, we worked around the clock to send out blueprints for makeshift Faraday cages and instructions for building solar shade canopies using local materials. The network grew. One by one, we established repeaters. A rig in Buenos Aires, another in Nairobi, then in Perth. Each time, a new community flickered to life, broadcasting its needs and sharing its innovations. In the Arctic Circle, survivors showed how they used geothermal vents to power induction heaters. In the Sahara, people used sand-cooled reflectors to keep solar arrays from overloading. Excerpts of my own voice crackled through these broadcasts. My words now a lifeline for countless souls. Jiro recovered slowly. The infection cleared after a 10-day course of antibiotics. Mara's burns faded into silvery scars that she touches as if they're badges of honor. Jasper and his sister were integrated into a youth education program, learning engineering and medicine from volunteer instructors. The hermit, who calls himself Ezekiel, has become our lead biofuel specialist. He's even built a small reactor, using algae that glows green under LED lights. For the first time, I permitted myself to dream. I walked through the agricultural bay with Cole Kim, who showed me rows of kale, lettuce, and spirulina, grown under LED-supplemented sunlight. He explained how they'd modified growth cycles by exposing plants to specific wavelengths that mimicked pre-flare spectral conditions. We're not just surviving, he said quietly. We're learning to adapt. I sat with Dr. Malik in the medical wing one evening as we watched volunteer medics treat radiation burns and run blood tests. She pointed to a chart showing the drop-in acute radiation cases over the last week. It's because your broadcasts about shifting schedules to avoid midday peaks worked. Communities are staggering their outdoor work. I felt a pang of pride, twinged with the memory of those we couldn't save. Thousands died before they heard my warnings. But still they are alive now because others listened. I often retreat to the room where the massive directory of broadcast recordings is stored. Rows of hard drives, each labeled by coordinate and date. I scroll through them sometimes, my voice frantic in the early days, then gradually calmer as solutions emerged. Each clip is a testament to our resilience. Still, each day is a struggle. We run on a skeleton crew of volunteers, barely enough to maintain equipment. Fuel cells need constant maintenance. A single misaligned diode can cascade into failure. We ration food carefully, thanks to Coles. Vertical farms, we're self-sufficient for now. But that could change if a multi-kiloton solar storm fries our primary arrays. Every night, I broadcast the daily update. Radiation maps, storm forecasts, resource tips. Sometimes I read letters from children, handwritten on salvaged paper. Thank you for teaching me how to grow carrots in a bunker. Those letters tear at my heart. These kids have known only darkness and danger, and yet they write with hope. 1. Morning. A knock came at the vault door. I opened it to find a delegation from the Rust Valley Collective, people I'd once scavenged with, now survivors of a small community thriving under makeshift solar shelters. They carried amber jars of honey produced by bees they'd raised in sealed hives. An astonishing feat. Their leader, a grizzled man named Terrell, embraced me. Your broadcast brought us together, he said, voice thick. Now we've got 4 families living here thanks to your instructions on shielding our greenhouses. I wanted to collapse into tears. We stood in the low glow of emergency lights, watching as they held out those jars, jewels of sweetness in this bitter world. Later that day, I climbed to the surface. The first time in a week. The air was hot but bearable under my suit. I found a patch of scorched earth where grass used to grow. Tiny shoots of green emerged from cracks in the asphalt, mutated, but alive. I knelt and brushed dirt away. With the Geiger counter, I confirmed. Levels were less than 0.1 sieverts per hour, safe enough to plant hardy seeds. I traced letters into the soil, H-O-P-E. It felt childish, but I couldn't help it. Here, amidst the ruin, I planted a row of spinach. The soil was thin, but I nourished it with trace minerals from my lab. If anything grows, it'll be a small victory. Returning inside, I replayed that moment over the monitors, watching as dust motes drifted in golden sunlight, as my hand pressed into the earth, as a single blade of green bent toward the sky. What was once a symbol of death, a cracked parking lot, had become a cradle for life. In the following days, communities from across the network shared their own garden plans. Hydroponic lettuce in Uganda, mushroom farms in Siberian bunkers, cacti, sprouts in Mexico. We were building a tapestry of survival, threads of knowledge woven through the airwaves circling the globe. But this fragile renaissance has its costs. Just last night, Captain Reyes came to my quarters with news. A relay station in Greenland was lost. A massive geomagnetic surge overwhelmed its shielding. The relay powers down, severing contact with Scandinavian enclaves. We can re-establish it, but it'll cost us precious personnel hours. Time we might need to shore up our own defenses. As I write this, I feel the tremors in my hands, the weight of responsibility. Millions now rely on our transmissions. Each error I make, each omission could lead to death. The pressure is relentless. Yet every time I doubt myself, I recall Jiro's face when he woke, alive. I remember those green shoots breaking through asphalt. I hear children's voices reading my instructions. We're no longer just survivors huddling in bunkers. We're engineers of a new world, shaping life where none should exist. The solar flare changed everything. It exposed our vulnerabilities, but also highlighted our capacity for innovation and compassion. In the searing crucible of annihilation, we discovered the finest parts of ourselves. I don't know what tomorrow holds. The sun remains unpredictable, a colossal furnace that could unleash another wave of destruction at any moment. But for today, I have enough. Enough fuel to keep the transmitters on, enough food from our vertical farms, and enough allies across the globe to ensure that if we fall, we do so together, not in isolated despair. This morning, I tuned into every broadcast frequency just after dawn. Across dozens of channels, voices crackled. A family in rural Argentina singing a lullaby to a newborn child. A group in Tokyo celebrating their first harvest of lentils. An engineer in Nairobi announcing a new water purification system using charcoal filters. Each transmission was a flicker in the darkness, a reminder that life persists, even when the sky itself turns hostile. I sat behind the microphone and spoke into the static. Listeners around the world, this is Dahlia Cortez of the Last Light Convoy. I'm breathing the same air as you, air that carries dust from burned fields, ash from ancient forests. I feel the heat pressing down. I feel the fear that knots in my gut. but I also feel something else. Hope, because I've seen what we can achieve when we share knowledge and compassion. I've seen a single seed break through concrete. I've seen a child smile when they tasted fresh spinach for the first time since the flare. The world we knew is gone. But there's a new world, emerging from the ashes, one built on cooperation, ingenuity, and unbreakable resolve. We have to keep pushing forward, keep broadcasting, build those farm domes, fortify your shelters, teach your neighbors what you know, protect each other from radiation and from despair. If you're listening, know this: you matter. Your knowledge matters. Your voice matters. We're rewriting the story of humanity one broadcast at a time, and as long as we speak, as long as we build, there's a chance for sunrise. I ended the transmission. The microphone hummed, then fell silent. I sat in the hush, feeling tears blur my eyes. So much has been lost. The geometry of stars, the smell of pine forests, the taste of fresh rain. But in this silence, I sensed something new, a collective heartbeat pulsing across continents. Tonight, as I climb to the surface for another planting session, I'll walk through the shattered library yard, books strewn across the ground, pages yellowed and brittle. I'll gather scraps of paper, academic journals, technical manuals, even old children's storybooks. I'll bring them back to our makeshift archive, a repository of knowledge for future generations. I often wonder, centuries from now, if someone excavates this bunker, what will they find? Will they find my brittle, weathered voice etched into old hard drives? Will they unearth journals stained with ink and tears? Will they realize that in the darkest days, we fought to preserve the faintest traces of civilization? I think they will. Because right now I'm stamping every piece of data with a single message: learn, adapt, survive. I want to leave you with one final truth. Hope is fragile. It can be snuffed out by a single miscalculation, an unshielded solar cell, leaky water filter, a misunderstanding between desperate strangers. I've nearly lost hope myself, many times over. I've stared into the abyss and felt its gravity tug at my soul. But still, I chose to rise each morning and speak into this microphone, because even in a world stripped bare by cosmic fury, we can kindle something that cannot be taken by radiation or storms: community. The radio waves we send out right now are seeds of that community, gathered across deserts, mountains, frozen tundras, and scorched plains. When the next flare hits, and it will, we'll be ready, or as ready as we can be. We'll tweak our shielding, reroute our circuitry, strengthen our alliances. We'll remind ourselves that the sun, for all its fury, also gives us light and life. We'll learn to respect it anew. But let's not wait for the next disaster to galvanize us. Let's act now. Share what you know, build what you can, listen for the faintest signals of others reaching out. If you have water, share it. If you have solar panels, lend them. If you have a safe tunnel, open it. Each small act of generosity is a beacon in this twilight world. I don't know if we can restore Earth to its former glory. Maybe one day, children, born after the flare, will look up at a sky-tinted violet and know it only as history, ancient but not forgotten. Maybe they'll learn from our mistakes, forging a new civilization in harmony with nature, rather than in conflict. But until that dawn arrives, we must keep fighting for today. We must keep broadcasting our voices, our knowledge, our hope. Because as long as we're breathing through this haze of dust and radiation, there is a chance. And as long as there's a chance, we must seize it with every ounce of strength we have left. So to you, wherever you are, under a lead-lined roof in Siberia, huddled in a cave in the Andes, or tending a rooftop garden in a crumbling city, hear me now. Stand tall. Build fiercely. Love fiercely. In this fractured world, community is our greatest weapon against oblivion. Let's wield it with courage and compassion. The sun might blaze and scorch the earth, but it cannot burn the light of human spirit. Stay vigilant, stay connected, and keep the spark alive. I'll be here, speaking into the void, hoping someone is listening, because as long as my voice survives, so does hope. Good night, friends. I'll be back on air at dawn.